Well, so glad you all are able to join us tonight for Mr. and Mrs. Dove to be able to join us. Two of our parents, they both have a background in law. But before we continue though, I'd like to open this night in prayer if you all would mind bowing your heads. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this Pie Night and this opportunity to just further understand what we're doing at Providence and the opportunity we have to participate in your kingdom here. In your name, amen. All right. So this is just going to be a series of discussions about things related to logic as we understand what logic is, of course, and then also learn how we can respond to our children's excellent logic once they've acquired that skill. But before we get to that, I would love to hear just both of you all's educational journey, both personally and with your family as a whole.
You go first, or you want me to?
Go ahead. Our background, like our educational background,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I went to Irwin County High School. So all the way through, I guess. Elementary.
You're enthusiastic. He's like Irwin County has a unique enthusiasm about their alma mater.
So
I've
you went to
learned.
Irwin County.
Yes.
What year did you graduate?
2013.
Okay, well, I'm 2001. Anyway, I K through 12, that's where I went to school, and I went 1 year to ABAC, and I transferred up to the University of Georgia, and that's where I graduated. After that,
Go Dogs.
yes, that's right. And I went to law school at University of Mississippi College in Jackson, Mississippi, and I went there a year, and that's where I met Katie. She was a third-year law student, and at that point I transferred and finished up at Florida Coastal in Jacksonville, because Katie had gotten a job in Moultrie, and that's where she was going to be, and I wanted to, of course, be closer to her. So I transferred back closer to Moultrie and kind of commuted, but that's where I went. Got my law degree from there, and that's kind of my educational background. Katie's is a little bit different, not too bad.
A little bit.
Yeah, somewhat similar though. I went to public school, K through 12, Bullitt County Schools, Statesboro, Georgia, and from there went to VSU and was on a pre-law track there. So that was a degree in political science, and from there I went to Mississippi College. That was in Jackson, Mississippi. So we were two like rural South Georgia folks met in downtown Jackson, Mississippi. It was unique, and
Yeah. That's a Christian college, isn't it? I think
it
I've
is.
heard
It's
of
a
it.
Baptist university, so
Yeah.
it's really like Mississippi's equivalent of Mercer. They have a main campus that was in a suburb of Jackson, and then the law school was downtown. We were like a block from their Capitol building and their courts of appeals, and if you like John Grisham, his novels or some of his novels are set in that area. So that was cool. So I essentially went all the way to Mississippi to meet someone from South Georgia. So my dad said, "You went all the way to Mississippi to meet South Georgia boy?" It's like, yeah, but that was just God writing our story. And so I was the third year, had already taken a job in Moultrie, and met him, and we were both like, yeah, let's get the heck out of here, this place, and let's get back to where we started. And that was really our independent vision, was to go to South Georgia. I kind of fall in love with this part of the state when I was in college, Valdosta. So that's how I got here, and that's and then after that, I was like, everything's kind of a blur, right? Because it was babies and the practice of law just grew a practice and grew a family all at the same time overnight. So yeah,
That's wonderful. And then how did you all discover classical Christian education? I mean, both of you all were in the public school system, K through 12. So how did you discover it, and what sold you on it?
I'll say Katie. I mean, I've always loved to read classics. I mean, you know, Hugo, you name it, Tolstoy. So I've always read the classic. But Katie, you know, when we started having children and we were trying to figure out what we're going to do as far as education goes, she took a more active role in it. It's in researching and looking at what she thought would be best for them. And we've talked about it together, but I would say, I mean, what I can remember learning from it in school, of course, was valuable, but I know Katie, she tackled that part head on, and I was in agreement with her, but I trust her judgment on almost anything, and she
That's good.
was really,
Wise man.
yes, she put a lot of time into it, we talked about it, and she can shed more light on that.
Well, I mean, just from a practical standpoint, we do a lot of divide and conquer in our marriage and as a couple, because I mean, it really is necessary to get through all that needs to be done. But we started out homeschooling, and so in the homeschool world, if you ever have delved into that, there's multiple educational methods that are very common in that homeschool world, and most, if you're going through that, most homeschool parents will look at all of those methods and see what fits. There's a lot of overlap between classical education and Charlotte Mason's methods, and so that's probably, as far as my own educational philosophy, is a mixture of both of those. You don't see Charlotte, I would even say we're using a lot of Charlotte Mason's methods up here, but you don't, her methods were really geared so specifically to homeschools. That's what her writing was geared towards.
She uses a lot of the narration.
A lot of narration, a lot of dictation, a lot of living books as the rather than textbooks as the method for teaching materials. Discussion is one of the highest forms of just meeting out ideas and evaluating ideas. So yeah, but that's how we came to discover classical education. And when we were in Moultrie, we started out in Moultrie, and there was a classical school there, so we knew a lot of classical educators. Moultrie's had a Classical Conversations, which is a homeschool classical co-op in existence for years, and they're kind of like a hotbed for classical education, classical thought. So we had a lot of friends involved in it too, and yeah, that's how we came. So we were. It was a logical fit for our family. I mean, with our humanities
Logical,
background.
there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So
Yes.
it was an easy fit, but I think we've fallen just more in love with it as time goes on. So that's how we discovered it.
That's wonderful. So tonight's evening, of course, is geared toward logic. You're just mentioning the trivium, of course. So what role do you believe that logic plays in classical Christian education?
As far as education in general, I know it's very important.
Or education as a whole?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
sir.
just at an early age. I mean, it shapes your foundation on how you think and how you look at everything. I mean, it's you think about it. If you're at home and the air conditioner goes out, for example, you think, okay, well, I need to go look at the thermometer, the thermostat, or I need to go check the outside. You sort of you logically think through a problem, so it starts at an early age, and that's why I think it's important for educational purposes. Teaching it very early on, because it teaches you how to think, and it's valuable all throughout education, whether it's based on a law background or a mathematical background. It's important either way you look at it. Katie probably got more to say on it.
Okay.
Well, I think maybe because we started out with I've never had this, I've always had this idea that education and child rearing are not two separate things. And education, where our parenting, it doesn't stop and then education starts. I mean, it's not this completely separate component. It's just part of that. It's part of us raising them, is that they're going to be educated, right? And so while right now in this season that takes place in a brick and mortar building, logic is just a foundational part of life. It's a foundational part of the search for truth. So whether we're looking at a theological issue at the home, whether it's a practical issue like Andrew mentioned, or whether we're studying a subject up here in a more formal setting, logic's essential to just searching out the truth, and the pursuit of the truth is a critical part of that. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. Yes, I love the bit about pursuing truth. That's one of the key things we're hoping to cultivate in our students is a love of truth. And I believe logic definitely plays a part in that. So, have either of you all personally studied logic? And if so, what has been your experience with it?
I don't know if I've ever, me personally, have I taken a course on it? I think, you know, you learn it throughout different subjects that I've taken. But I was talking to Katie about this when we were, leading up to this discussion. I know when we were planning to go to law school, when you take the LSAT, which is the law school admissions test, there's several, you got several sections. I know two of them, logical reasoning and logic games. I mean,
Really? I didn't know that.
And critical thinking, it's probably like
Is there a number?
90% of that test is.
I think there's 3 sections, but anyway, yeah, that's a large part of it. And
Interesting.
so, taking those courses, I got the book and read for it, trying to get ready on it, but that was a large part of it, and we did study. That's when I can first remember it, and I know I've done it prior to that probably, but that's what sticks out to me, was in getting ready for the LSAT.
Okay.
I took 2 courses of philosophy as part of the pre-law program at VSU that were, centered on logic, and so they look very similar to the logic that's taught here in middle school. Same material. So it was just introduction to logical thought. Learn a lot about deductions, fallacies, syllogisms, et cetera, et cetera. So it was super helpful. It was the most helpful class I took for the LSAT. But yeah, as far as being admitted to law school, that's based, and the LSAT plays essentially the role that the SAT does in college admissions, and scoring well on that and doing well in that logic is just, it's a major hurdle. I mean, you won't be able to progress in a legal education without an ability to think critically and apply formal logic to an argument, make an evaluation, or make a deduction. And the way those questions are, it's like A will be A, B, C, and then they'll have a couple more options. It's like possibly A, but not B, but maybe C, and then the next one will be, some other variation, like your mind's just spinning by the end of it.
It's pretty straightforward stuff, right?
Yeah.
That's what I first saw where logic really plays a part in math. There's
Yeah.
one
Oh,
section
yes.
that's called logic games, and it was always something when I was in school, when I could do the calculus, I could do all the math problems, but then they'd have the word problem, and I didn't really care about those. I could still make a B if I just knew how to do the math. But the word problem, and then the LSAT, there's a section where that's a large part of it. It's kind of like, okay, you got 4 teachers. On Monday, this teacher wears a blue suit with a black tie, and this teacher wears on this day. So if so and so's teaching on Tuesday, if there's a teacher with the black pants, and then who would it be? It'd be that section really helped people that went to, say, Georgia Tech, a math mind could really look at that
You set up those
and get
charts,
it.
where it's like yes, no, and if it fits, and that's how you have to set up those charts to make the deduction. You have to do that on the test. I mean, if you don't take the time to jot it out the chart, you won't be able to analyze the
So
problem.
that's just where
It's interesting you mentioned that because, I took a lot of math courses because that's one of the main things my specialty is for my master's degree. But my undergrad, one of the math courses I took was a logic course, and going into it, I was like, how's logic math? That doesn't make sense. But then I got into it, and I realized like the truth tables and everything, and which that's more like our intermediate logic, which we'll be doing next year more so. But I realized like, there's so much crossover between math and logic. It was very surprising, but also really wonderful.
Yeah, it can be kind of fun if you're into like Sudoku or crossword puzzles or that sort of thing.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's like similar, this curriculum, the Critical Thought Company, they have those little tables and problems for like young ages. It's just really fun. You learn that sort of thing.
I am personally.
Yeah.
I tell students about like, Sudoku puzzles is so great,
Yeah.
and some of them just be like, oh no, here he goes again.
Yeah.
Or I was like, y'all, we're talking about game theory for just a brief moment in geometry before we closed, and I was like, like the game theory stuff in football. It's just math, right? Like, should you go for it on fourth down or not? It's just
Yeah.
game theory and logic, but they get it eventually.
Yeah,
Like,
and we're
you
just
can,
not
you
fun.
can learn math and reasoning from watching some sports, right?
Yeah, you can. For
That's
sure.
right. What benefits, besides, do you have any other benefits that you all would say that come with studying logic? Would you say it's limited to preparation for the law field, or it goes beyond that?
Yeah, I think it runs hand in hand with common sense, you know, just being, I guess, street smart, just being able to look at any type of problem, whether somebody's trying to tell you something, trying to sell you something, get you to sign up for this, you can reason and you can see what they're saying and apply it to what you think might happen, you know, what they're telling you may happen. It can assist you in making a decision about just anything in everyday life.
Yeah, I mean, it's the pursuit of truth. I mean, I really see, I mean, logic is just the pursuit of truth. I mean, just a more technical way of describing how we pursue truth. So, I mean, I think its value is just limitless. We use it all the time as Christians, all the time to solve problems, to make decisions, to weigh two factors. And I mean, as Christians, we get a lot of liberty, we get a lot of freedom, right, to live out our faith. There's certain areas, there's a lot of areas where we get to we just have freedom. I mean, like Megan and I've talked about this, we might disagree, you know, like she may have a different standard for certain things in her home, and one's not right and one's not wrong within certain parameters, but we're using logic to make those judgment calls. With the law office, I mean, that's in the justice system, you're constantly using logic to pursue truth, to make arguments, to, you know, whether he's a criminal defense attorney, so it's like he's living in it every day with the what really happened, who did it, and yeah, we use it all the time. I think it's tremendously valuable. You can look at it's ultimately going to help our children and these students, I mean, wade through the world and hopefully be able to discern what is truth versus what is, I mean, Satan is the author of lies, right? So he's the father of lies. So he's going to be constantly throwing some deception, some scheme at them that really is just maybe compelling and maybe attractive to them for some reason, because not only is it going to be built on lies, but it's going to play on their you know, fleshly desires. And so I mean, logic is going to be one of many tools to sort through that. And I think you could really do that. I think it's very, very important, which is probably, I mean, why we think it's, which is probably why we're drawn to careers where that's you know, focused.
That's wonderful. Do you have any children who have taken logic?
Yeah.
I think Mary Frances has. I don't know that the others have, but Mary Frances, am I?
Yeah, I mean, you know, she's the oldest. So she got the like little tables in preschool, the little like versions of this that were for early elementary in the homeschool context. She did, but Claire got a little less, and now you know, now they go to school here, of course. So I mean, we started in the middle school, which the Trivium has been a very helpful tool for understanding children and child development. And that's an example of how I would use classical education to just understand and maybe shape some of our parenting strategies too. And most of y'all are familiar with it, you know, but it's the basic concept that in the elementary ages, we're just feeding into them the building, and you could probably just put this out here more eloquently than I could, but as I understand it as a parent, it's that we're giving them the building blocks of knowledge, okay? We're feeding a lot, their brains are really hardwired to receive information, to store information at that age. Their language skills are amped up, so we're giving them a lot of information, and then when they enter those pre-teen, 12, 13, middle school years, they're gonna start putting those blocks together and seeing how they fit together and what they build when you start stacking ideas on one on top of each other, how you might balance two competing ideas instead of just looking to us for the answers all the time. So What was the question?
It's just, do you have any?
Yeah, they
Do you have
study
any
it
of your
here in
children who
middle
have
school.
studied?
Yeah.
Yes, I know the answer personally.
Yeah, they study it here in middle school, so.
Yes.
Mary
What
Frances
is-
loves it, yeah.
Yes.
She
Well,
loves
I hear
it.
she has a wonderful logic teacher.
She loves it, yeah.
Oh, I won't pat myself on the
You or
back.
her is the teacher.
I'm the one at school. I'm sure
Yeah,
she's
yeah,
probably the
yeah.
teacher at home. It continues at home because it is. We'll get to this a little later. It can be a challenging subject to study because it can be very conceptual at times. But
Yeah.
it's a good challenge because like we were saying, we want to cultivate not only love of truth but also our reasoning ability, which is incredibly important. So something that parents typically observe in their children while they're taking a logic class is that they just suddenly, out of the blue, begin to reason and argue better. Who knew that logic would do that, right? And one of the results occasionally is that children will begin pushing back a little more against their parents. Have you all experienced this at all?
Oh, sure. They,
Ours didn't need the classes. They were
didn't
like
need the
born.
classes.
they all,
Mr.
We're
Norris
just giving them more.
knows what I'm talking about here. They were born with the ability to push back and challenge us on every conceivable level. But yeah, I mean, say the classical education fosters that, makes a rich environment for debate and growth of those. So we've
And
seen.
you wanna, I mean, even if you disagree with them, it's good for them to get their point out there because it helps them, I think, is thinking
Yes.
through their argument and their position, and then you can ask them a question about it and say, well, no, that's not true, or, I disagree with you. You shouldn't be able to do that because of X, Y, and Z, and it just, it's just building their brain.
He's the king of this. I mean, he'll sit back and just have a ball with like, oh, okay. So let me, you tell this. Now, what does this one? What does this sibling say over here? You tell us your side of the story, and then they'll tell, okay. And he'll go back to this way. Well, she says that.
Well, maybe we can get the camera over to y'all's household so we can record this as an add-on to our pie night.
a much more fun version of this, the interesting version. I can
You like
promise
to
you.
hear them out and let
Yes.
them defend they're getting in trouble and they're defending their position. And,
Yeah.
I like to hear it, even though I may disagree with it, it gets them thinking.
So, would you all say that it's a net positive taking logic, even if it can result in children pushing back against their parents, or is it a net positive, net negative, or neutral?
I think it's positive, I mean.
We wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, we love debate, we love discussion, we love learning new things. So, I mean, I say that's an easy net positive for us. We want to cultivate this environment to where, now I want them to defer to my authority. If we're talking about making a decision, a parenting decision, I mean, we can have debate and discussion, but they have to ultimately defer to our authority. And we discussed a book. I was thinking about this book when I was looking at this question this summer. It's part of a Providence parent group called Duties of Parents. It was written by J.C. Ryle, so it's an older book, very readable though. And he says in there, train your children in a habit of faith, which is a mindset that tends to defer to authority figures and just older people in general. I mean, just taking biblical concepts of that part of humility is understanding what people that are older than you and have more experience than you likely are wiser than you, okay? So to the extent you're gonna push back with that, unless you're using line for line the Bible to have that, then, I mean, you really should be assuming that they probably are
Amen
gonna
to that.
be more likely to reach the right conclusion than you, and that you should be deferring to your parents. But, I mean, so that's what I'd add to it, is that while we welcome debate, and we do a ton of this type of banter in our home, we at the same time try to feed them this robust philosophy of authority and what that means, and what God, how he describes authority, and just the benefits and blessing of authority, and the different roles that it plays. And so when it comes down to making decisions, we don't like give away any of our authority. I mean, judges certainly don't in a courtroom.
Well, that's what I was
they hear,
thinking.
yeah.
No, when I was, it may have been back in 2014, the judge once said, you know, you may not like my ruling, but you're gonna have to accept it.
Mhm.
So, you know.
That's right.
You may disagree with it, but that's what's gonna be.
That's right. I love the comment about just learning to just out of our posture, generally speaking, should just be to defer to people who are older and wiser than us. I'll take that snippet and play it in class. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe some of our students think I'm a little older and wiser than I really am. I know I have a couple more gray hairs than I did a couple months ago, but
Yeah.
but yes, that's really important.
I mean, we want to sit at the feet of wiser people and seek out their wisdom and, you know, seek out having these conversations. And that's going to be, I mean, that you're embracing that more fully as they get older, right? Because they're ultimately, you want them to adopt these ideas as their own and then continue to seek older, wiser people for counsel voluntarily. So, I mean, there again, that's where, like, you might look at the trivium and we say, obey right away, all the way with good attitude every day, right? And that's I mean, that's like we really simplify that at the younger levels. But as they age and as they do begin to push back, we welcome that in a sense because they're becoming more nuanced thinkers, and it doesn't ultimately change that we're their authority figures. But as they grow closer to that line, to not being under our authority, I mean, I want them to have robust thought and complete thought, and so that's how we develop it in our house.
Absolutely.
Seek to develop it.
Well, now I would like to, since we're not able to go and film these interactions with this children, go through a couple of examples of maybe some scenarios that some parents may have with their children, and just if you all would be able to respond to some of these scenarios. The first one says your child tells you they want to attend a public high school next year. They argue this is their one and only chance to play the sport they love, and that they may never receive a scholarship for college in that sport as a result. How would you respond?
Well,
We're a big sports
have-
family.
yeah,
so-
I understand. I'm the same
We've
way.
been talking about sports for a long time. When Andrew and I met, one of our first dates was watching his brother pitch for the first time on television on
Oh, wow. That's
ESPN at the
amazing.
Cardinals. Yeah, I mean, he
Yeah.
got called up right. He was on a 40-man roster, but right when we started dating, so it was on
it
TV.
was Monday Night Baseball on ESPN. So yeah, she came over.
Watched him
We
pitch.
watched it. I would, as far as this goes, you tell them, look, you're not gonna. Even my brother that played in the majors, he's working now. Very less than 0.01% make it long enough where they make a bunch of money and they don't have to ever work. I mean, so sports, I think, are very important. Our kids do them, but at the end of the day, the chances that it's not going to pay your bills when you get 35 years old.
Of course.
It is important, and as far as a scholarship, there's other ways to get a scholarship, and I don't think
That's right.
if you're good enough, somebody's going to see you. So I'd make those type of arguments. And I know Katie could elaborate further.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about sports and tried to develop a robust philosophy about sports from a young age because I came from a family where we played a lot of sports, and my mom was a college athlete. My dad played sports all through high school. It was just a big part of my life growing up. I did competitive cheerleading, traveled with that all through high school. And Andrew, of course, they were a big baseball family. So we had to talk about sports, what role they were going to play in our family, what type of priority they were going to be, how we were going to navigate that, and what, spiritually speaking, how we were going to avoid the pitfalls of making them an idol. It all seemed simpler, I think, than it really is when you get through. So I can understand this question. I could relate to the parent facing this dilemma. That can be hard. But as far as how I would respond to it is that from a young age, so you have to take a decision like this. It involves balancing multiple factors, and one factor doesn't just trump the other factors. And some factors carry more weight than others, and that would be their spiritual well-being, what ultimately is going to shape them into the person God designed them to be. How are we going to, what decision is in furtherance of our obligation to raise them in the wisdom and admonition of the Lord, to train them up in the way in which they should go. A lot of times with public schools, there's, we could talk, forever about that, but one of the issues is just, are they anywhere near mature enough to go into a secular setting, right? And withstand the amount of temptation they're going to encounter there? Are they going to be able to think through the worldly philosophies that are thrown at them there? So their spiritual well-being, in my opinion, would be very much on the line so that would, I think looking at the question too, you can, just like Andrew said, you can get scholarships in different ways. It's not necessarily, that's like a false dichotomy, a false choice, right? That would be the fallacy there, kind of built into that question if the child pitched it that way, was that you have to go to public school but we think about these things at a young age. We try to develop a path for them intentionally, like I know all of you do, where they can pursue their sports. And Mary Frances is very much interested in being recruited as a swimmer. She's got Nora swimming with her now. And so their times are all, their USA times are really where most of that recruitment takes place. It's outside of the cross country is the same way. Tennis is the same way. I mean, a lot of these sports you can pursue to the absolute fullest extent without being, without going to public school to do it. Sometimes you really have a lot more freedom being outside of the public school system to invest in them. So.
What about the statement, we want to be on mission, so we're going to the public school?
On mission.
Being on mission, like being missionaries in a
I see
sense.
what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's a young age to be on that path, I guess. I mean, if they're real mature is one thing, but still, you're still very malleable during those years. And so that wouldn't be a selling point, but there's just other ways that you could get a better education somewhere else, and you'll deal with people. Like when I was in high school, I worked at a grocery store. I worked with, had I gone to a private school, I would have, 6 hours, not every day, but a lot of days, 4 to 10. I would have come in contact and worked alongside people that were in the public school. So it's, there's other ways to be. I mean, you can approach it a different way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd encourage the thought there that they're wanting to be intentional about being on mission. I think that's important. I think, ultimately as Christians, we're all making these judgment calls every day. Like, when do we flee temptation, and when do we, as part of just being a light, being salt and light in the world, just move forward bravely and boldly with our beliefs? My personal experience has been that more often than not, and with young people, not always the case for certain. I've known many people come out of public school system on mission. I know people who are there now on mission, so there's no universal application to this. A lot of this is going to just depend on the child's personal maturity, right? And like how serious about being on mission, and how the ability to withstand the temptations and to not let that bad company corrupt good morals. How much evidence are you really seeing in their own life of this? But for our children, I mean, where they're at, that would not be an option. I mean, it would just be, they would immediately be, in my speculation, heavily influenced by the worldliness and not able to discern. I also, another thought I have is like, I highly value my time with them, especially as Mary Frances is going towards high school. Like, it's just precious, just the opportunities to have these conversations, to pour into them. I've started to just see it as like, I just want to cherish every moment to pour into her, and we have so many important conversations that I want to have even before she graduates and launches out of our living in our household, that I'm not willing to sacrifice. I don't want to spend all that time having to decompress the ideas that she's been encountered during the day. I mean, we could do that as she gets older. We can do that in college. But it takes a lot of time and energy to go into a worldly, if you're a Christian, to analyze what you just encountered. I mean, I'm that way. You know, if I go into like a really secular environment, when I leave there, I have to kind of process and like sort through, and I'll find myself thinking, we really need a bigger house, you know, or whatever, you know, and I've just got to kind of sort it back through to what really matters. So I highly value an environment where we don't agree on everything, but there's a lot of like-mindedness there, and there's so much unity there that we can just spend that time focusing on what we're passionate about, and then, you know, kind of moving on into going out as they're more mature and older into that world and really embracing that mission with more preparation. So, yeah.
Last question. Your child tells you they are frustrated with their school's discipline protocol. They believe it's harsh and leaves no room for grace. How would you respond? It's everyone's favorite question.
Yeah.
You know, there's consequences for your actions, and you gotta, at a very early age, you have to accept that. And, you know, if you tell them, you don't make excuses for them at an early age, and they take responsibility for what they're doing wrong, I think it shapes them and it helps them going forward. Now, I know there's some kids are different, and they may have a harder time, but at the end of the day, you don't, you know, you just don't make excuses for. You tell them, hey, these are the rules. You gotta abide by them, and you don't deviate from that. And you know, I think it creates establishes a precedent, and I know that's the way it's going to be, and it helps them, I think, not make those, you know, get in trouble, or okay, if this is a dress code, I can't, you know, I can't wear shorts or whatever it may be. And they'll abide by it, you know, on a regular basis, and not try to, you know, skirt around it.
I mean, how many clients do you have say, this is unfair, this punishment doesn't fit the crime? And that's, how often do we encounter
Sometimes
that?
I agree with it. That is can be a bigger, you know, there's a massive scale on what, but yeah, I mean, if this is the law and you broke it. Like if you're riding around on a suspended license or registration and you don't know it, that's still, you know, there's still some, I mean, you can beg for leniency, you might get it, you might get a deal, but at the end of the day, you violated the law, and, you know, hey, here's your, you know, you gotta pay this fine, you gotta do that, even though, you don't like it, that's just the way it is, you gotta have order.
That's right. We're responsible to not be ignorant of things.
Right. So, you may not like it, but it's, you know, if you just, if they said, oh, okay, you didn't know, then, you know, it would kind of create a problem, and if you know, for a lot of other people, they're like, hey, I don't have to, like, you know, if you don't have to pay a parking ticket, you see that in some cities. And I don't know how that'll turn out long term. If you don't have to obey a parking meter, if we don't have to do that around here, or shoplifting, things like that, it just creates a problem, I think. I don't think you should just throw everybody in jail, but at the same time, you have to have order.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way rules are set up for. So.
I mean, we've had some heartbreaking cases where we didn't think the punishment fit the crime, but we were still, I mean, that's what the client, that's what they got, you know, under the legal system. And
I mean, like a burglary, for example, can carry a minimum of 1 year or 20 years. It could be 1 year on probation, 1 year in prison, or it can be 20 years in prison.
It's a pretty large range.
Yeah, it is, and it's up to a judge to say, okay, or a DA, or, you know, district attorney could say, all right, I'll agree to let them do 10 years probation and 6 months at the detention center. So there's a range of punishment, but if you go to trial and lose, for example, the judge could say 1 year or say 20 years. You just, and I may disagree with the ruling, but that's just within the discretion of the court. So if there's a rule here at the school that says this, you know, it. If the punishment is met out, then there's no appeal process, I don't think. You have to accept it.
So,
I mean, justice, you know, as principals, like if they were to bring this to me, my mind would go to like, it's a principle of justice, right? Justice versus, it said grace, but I think mercy is probably what they're asking. They're saying it doesn't allow for enough exceptions to be made, right, to the rules. We have the rules, we agree what the conduct is. They're probably really not taking issue with the rules as they're put forward in the manual, the student handbook, right? They're more or less saying, well, they require obedience, but even though they told me to be still, and I wasn't still, and they asked me to step out of the classroom, you know, that was harsh. They should have asked me a few more times, right? They said, well, should have been a little more grace. That's how it goes at my house. So, you know, I mean, I would just probably kind of say the same thing. It's, justice. You want justice to be uniform. You want to know what's expected. You want it to be carried out. Those are our notions of fairness. Ultimately, they're biblical. We have a very just God that doesn't overlook sin. I heard Voddie Baucham preach one time that there's a tension between justice and mercy. There's an inherent tension between justice and mercy, and that the cross ultimately resolves that tension. That's the only place where you really find perfect mercy and perfect justice, and that's perfect love right there in the cross. But in a fallen world, right, and we're doing the best we can with it, they're going to encounter tension, and I'm always trying to build that in. Like, you're going to encounter places that are difficult, and you're going to encounter teachers that exercise that discretion in ways in which you disagree. You're going to encounter that here. You're going to encounter that in life. We encounter it all the time with judges. A large part of what Andrew does is advocate, right? But he's as an attorney, he's acting as an advocate, not as a decision maker. The judge is acting as a decision maker. Your teachers are acting as decision makers. So they're going to exercise that discretion in ways that you may disagree with. So, you know, we're going to talk about try to defer to that. Really try to train your mind to think they probably understand it better than you realize. And they probably know more about the situation than you realize. That said, they could have gotten it wrong. They could have made the wrong judgment call there, but they're within their discretion to make that call. And justice promotes order. This is not just fairness, it's also to promote order. I've used the analogy of, Jeremy and I have talked about this in the duties of parents, like a military analogy before. If you have an officer that outranks you, who gives you an order, you follow it, right? There's no debate in that. Even if you think it's the wrong judgment call, you don't think we should move forward with this mission. The decision maker makes that call. They have discretion. They're the one who makes that call. You're going to have disorder and chaos, and probably more danger if you stop and try to argue that, or you try to assert your own authority in those circumstances. Same thing in the teaching context, and same thing in the parenting context too. Kind of just going back to deferring to authority and realizing there's a value to obeying that, and you're not entitled to be heard on it, and just really to having conversations about overlooking offenses because they're offended, right? If they think they've been wrongfully disciplined, if they think, and this is not like the question's a little different, it's talking about the policy, but these are the arguments that I get. I have some students that make some compelling arguments against you guys when you're not around, about the injustice there.
It's really not against Mr. Norris.
They're encountering at school.
No, they're advocating for me.
Yeah. They've made all of the arguments, but they've got to defer to the teacher's judgment, whether or not they agree with it. And I think that's what I want them to do. I want them to cultivate a heart that realizes that somebody that has authority over you, you may think they're exercising that discretion. You may say, well, if I was in authority, I would have exercised discretion in a different way. That doesn't mean that's an abuse of their discretion. Mm-hmm. And so you need
more nuance.
Yeah, it's more nuanced, and you really need to be able to overlook it. We see people like ultimately their success or their failure as attorneys turn on their ability to know when to like let that issue go. You're never gonna convince that judge. He's made a ruling, you need to move on. And
Yeah, a lot of it's the way I was raised. I know I could come home, a teacher, never once, I mean, it was several times, but I could always remember my parents, you know, they didn't care what I had to say. They didn't care, it was just, they're the teacher, I don't, you know, this is what they said, you do it, or yeah, it wasn't, they didn't say, well, did she really say that, or he really, you know, did they really do that? You know, they never listened to it. I mean, they would, you know, it just, it always stuck with me.
That makes a big
Because
difference.
if they play into it, I think it can create a rift, which I never had, it of course never happened in my household, but, I always remember that. It was never, kinda like the customer's always right. It was always, no, I don't care, you don't talk, or whatever I was arguing about, or whatever I got in trouble about, they didn't care. I mean, they'd hear me, they'd listen to it, but it was, you know.
Well, we know Dr. Rucker was one of your teachers, so we'll have
She
to hear
was,
what
yeah,
you have
I
to say
know.
about her.
I wasn't the best, but I don't think I gave her a hard time.
There you go. She said many good things about you as a student, so
yeah.
it turned out all right.
Yeah,
I
we
could have
love
been
Dr.
better.
Ricker.
That's what that's what I was telling him earlier. You know, when I was in high school, I thought I was gonna play pro ball. Like, if you ask John Michael tomorrow, what are you gonna do when you grow up? He's gonna tell you, I'm gonna be a pro baseball player.
I thought the same thing when I played varsity soccer.
Yeah.
It took a while for me to realize that
It's good
if
to
I'm not
dream.
scoring a goal, you know, every 5 games, I'm probably not gonna make it that high.
Yeah.
Just, it took a while for that reality to set in, you know.
Logic kick in
Kicked
later.
in, yeah.
The logic, I didn't get to that as much in middle school either.
As you get older, yeah. But
Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
We think, I like to hear them out. I mean, and it's because, again, it's not that I don't
Right.
want them to be heard on the issue. I'm just more wanting them to cultivate that mindset, to defer to the authority, and to realize there's more going on than what you realize. And even, look, I mean, even if they made the wrong call, I mean, it's still, they've got to make 100 decisions in a day. You know, this day is not going to reasonably move forward. And that's how I am as a parent. I mean, I've made the wrong call before, but there's not, I mean, you have to do what you do in the moment, and you have to value that order where there's somebody in charge, you know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good that just comes from that in and of itself. So if you do feel like they made the wrong call, I mean, just to understand that there's a trade-off too. So, and just to overlook an offense. I mean, that's a skill, right? Like to know when, you know, when you encounter a harm, you have 2 options, right? As a Christian, you can overlook the offense, or you can pursue forgiveness and reconciliation. And I just think as we walk with the Lord and know the Lord better, and we develop a higher value and appreciation for what really matters, why we're really here, what we're unified on, that it becomes easier to overlook those offenses. And not that we're still going to have things where we really need to follow up and have some forgiveness and reconciliation and have some talk, but there's a lot that just needs to be overlooked within the scope of church Christian relationships, and I think the school relationships would kind of fall in that category.
After that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad everyone was able to join us tonight. If you all could give just a round of applause for our guests speakers tonight. It's phenomenal. We're so glad they were able to join us.
Yeah, thanks. It was
Thank
fun.
you all so much. Thank you for speaking tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
We enjoyed it.